ground mass is very fine. I'm going to step off the limb. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
The year is 1944. The US and the Allies are nearing the end of a long, grueling war with the Axis powers. With the development of the atom bomb by the US, this war will since be remembered not only for its tragedies like the Holocaust and the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but also for its large technological strides towards space exploration. The first of these strides included Nazi Germany's use of their own superweapon, the V-2 intercontinental missile. Being the first of its kind to leave Earth's atmosphere, the V-2 was invented for the purpose of bombing the English. The man to build such a weapon was Nazi engineer Wernher von Braun, a member of the SS and future pioneer of America's NASA program. He began work with the Nazis at the beginning of the war in 1939 and immediately earned a reputation as a lead aerospace engineer in the Nazi ranks. His reputation would soon go south, however, when he was accused of being a communist sympathizer by his colleagues. He was even accused of attempting to sabotage the V-2 program. These accusations caused him to flee Germany along with 500 other German scientists to avoid being executed by the Nazis. Concerned about the implications of German technology, America was anxious to gain an edge in the Nazis. Shortly after fleeing to Austria, the United States picked up Wernher and his team of 500 scientists in hopes of grasping an advantage. As they would soon find out, this investment was one that would not only help them win the war, but one that would give them the opportunity to explore the stars. Shortly after World War II, Wernher immediately began work as an American citizen. Shortly thereafter, the United States founded the NASA program, hiring Wernher as one of its lead engineers. Although the United States had begun working frivolously to finish the launch, in 1957 the Soviet Union launched the world's first ever satellite, the Sputnik. Likewise, the United States responded with their first satellite, the Explorer 1, in 1958. This was the true beginning of the famous space race that continued to rage onward for some time into the 1970s. Although the recent events were quite astonishing, the scientists had little time to rejoice. Instead, they had to focus their minds on a new concept, the Moon. Being the first to achieve a lunar flight would certainly be considered a monumental task from either side, and the rival countries both knew so. The important question, however, was, what counted as claiming or getting to the Moon first? The USSR Lunar Probe 2 became the first man-made object to reach the Moon, crashing into its surface at a high velocity in 1959. However, although it marked the first spacecraft to reach the Moon, it still had not completed the country's task of landing on it. Soon scientists brought in the idea of safe landings to other planets. During their efforts to outcompete the United States, the USSR also launched its first human into space with Yuri Gagarin's first flight in 1961, just weeks before the planned launch of the Americans. This was a major success from the USSR, but more was to come the United States' way. Other notable feats during the space race include the first woman in space, the first Mars flyby, and most notably, the first moon landing. Historically, in 1969, Apollo 11 landed safely on the Moon with American astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong being the first to set foot and begin their experimentation. This event not only marked an important success for NASA, but also the end of an era. It wasn't until 1975 that the US and the USSR had finally done their first joint space mission together as allies. This event includes the advancement of space technology with a period of innovation of several land rovers, effectively taking remote experimentation to unprecedented heights. This is also very significant due to the information that was exchanged. Both parties received great help on their own endeavours. Although Luna 2, a USSR rover, was launched in 1959, it had finally gained significance when it sent back images of the dark side of the Moon. This brought attention towards the ideas of picture evidence being taken from rovers. After many failed attempts in 1970, the USSR had pulled through with their Luna 17 rover that could actually move on wheels. It also carried with it a remote controllable rover known as the Lunokhod 1, which collected soil samples for further research of other planets. Meanwhile, the US was developing a new era for space travel and exploration that will revolutionize the space frontier in the 80s. It began with the first space shuttle that could orbit in space, the Columbia.
7, we have a go for main engine start. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, booster ignition.
It was very groundbreaking because it utilized reusing parts that were used in takeoff. The shuttle parts disembark off the ship, fall back to the Earth, and are reclaimed and used again. The incredible and maybe unfathomable events had been impressing and advancing the space program into the limelight. Although things were going well, mankind encountered a problem that had always been difficult to handle, but had finally been realized by a very tragic event.
Let's go down to the Kennedy Space Center and take a look at Challenger sitting on the pad.
8, 7, 6. We have main engine start. 4, 3, 2, 1.
In 1986, a space shuttle named the Challenger, which was carrying a schoolteacher, had exploded after a launch due to a breach in the pressurized gas that rushed from the motor. This was a very grim incident for NASA and space travel as a whole. The issue is that this problem had been around for a very long time, but as they say, it takes a crisis to make a change.
This morning it looked as though they were not going to be able to get off.
1 minute 15 seconds, velocity 2,900 feet per second.
Launch failures had always been possibilities for NASA, but the tragedy had brought an important change into the minds of millions of Americans. The fear of a launch failure had now become reality, instilling a sense of dread into the hearts of the witnesses.
The O-ring did get cold. How do you think that the average American citizen reacted to NASA's efforts to get into space?
Oh, I think as usual, the American support for space has always been, as one of my colleagues likes to put it, broader rather than deeper. So they're very proud for what America achieves in space, but they don't want to pay for it. And so, of course, many of them saw this, and that's a very typical thing, as bumbling by NASA management, typical government bureaucracy that's wasting taxpayers' dollars. My view is quite different to that. In my view, it was really bad luck that happened, because NASA, if you think over the history of the space shuttle, something like 135 launches, 2 of them were disasters, right? Challenger and Columbia. That's really bad luck for NASA, because both of those launches were in the public eye. There are many, many NASA launches that nobody even knows about or cares about. Many of them are with reconnaissance satellites for the Department of Defense. If it had been one of those more secret launches, nobody would have known. Of course, tragically, far fewer people would have been killed, and of course, it wouldn't have had the high public visibility. So just for NASA's bad luck, public visibility on those 2 launches were the 2 launches that failed, both due to really quite simple mistakes that were made. And sometimes NASA is to blame for that, sometimes its contractors is to blame. People should also bear in mind that NASA spends most of its money in American business. And often the business themselves are not fully up to what it takes to develop this kind of very complicated, very difficult technology. So I like to stress that it's a complicated, difficult technology, that NASA does make mistakes, so do the business people involved in it, but that we should also remember what a fantastic long-term track record they had, and not be so quick to blame them when accidents happen. Accidents will happen. We can't expect space exploration with such a sophisticated piece of technology to be accident-free. And if NASA's made any mistake, it's suggesting to the American people that this could be an accident-free experience. It can't be. There'll always be mistakes.
NASA's wariness of this issue was raised when many probes and rovers failed to land safely onto planets and had a stronger tendency to crash land onto them. With this in mind, the Mars Pathfinder utilized a new and innovative technology for landing safely. This parachute technology formed a large ball around the rover, keeping it safe from possible impact damage. Once landed, the rover set out exploring the planet and showing the world the conditions of Mars. These contributions paved the way in the future for a unified effort towards a common cause, space exploration. Throughout history, mankind's struggle and need to advance and explore has always been a factor in many of the events in our world's history. As humans, we may encounter either troubling problems or new thoughts on mankind's many concepts, but we always find a way to get past them. Finally, as humans, when one of us experiences or pulls through an idea, it is exchanged and reproduced even better than it was before. These ideals replicate the events and ideas of Earth's space exploration as it progressed immensely through time. It truly represents what humans have the ability to endure and create. The next question is, what is left for us to do? With the many new crafts and projects coming our way, the possibilities are endless.
Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.